joint workshop for the Oshkosh Area School District and the Oshkosh Common Council. Let's see here. Shall we take the roll?
I don't think we usually do that for these joint workshops.
All right, well, we'll just move right into our agenda then. This evening, we just have several items on the agenda tonight. And thank you everyone for making time this evening. The first item that we have here is the joint resolution suggested by the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. A couple of members worked on drafting. I believe you may have received an email earlier today regarding the standing in solidarity with the Asian Pacific Islander and Desi American community. And this is actually going to be on Council's agenda Tuesday. So we just wanted to share that with you in the event that the board had an interest in sharing in that resolution. By the way, is Mr. Peschel here? I'm not getting audio.
No, I don't see Mr. Peschel on here, Madam Mayor.
Did everyone receive the attachment earlier today?
Yeah.
Yes.
Would anyone care to make comment or discuss? Councilmember Wojciechowski.
I guess I'll say something. Well, I believe it was in the news today that President Biden just signed an executive order essentially doing the same thing. I'm supportive of it, and I'd love to see council and, the Oshkosh Area School District stand in solidarity with that. But also just, it's a message to those outside of the community that we are of accepting diversity, inclusion, and everything kind of that we stand for and that we've been pushing for in our plan. So it's something I'd like to see, and I'm glad that it's coming to council. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll just chime in, Lori. This is Ford here. That the resolution also specifically calls out some of the efforts of the Oshkosh Police Department to have outreach with the Asian community in Oshkosh. So I think that's worth pointing out too, that we do praise OPD in there.
Thank you, Councilmembers Wojciechowski and Councilmember Ford. All right, it looks like the next item we have is sorry here, let me get over here. The busing update. And I'm not sure, Mr. Collins, you're with us, right?
Yeah, Mr.
Yep,
Collins is here.
Yep.
Would you care to give us an update, or shall we turn it over to the school district?
Sure, I can give you a quick update. I mean, it's obviously with school starting online this year, it's really too early to tell much, but I can tell you that the program that we started with the start of the school year to offer the no-cost busing for the through the K through 12 students. As you can see, it started out really slow, which we, with everybody being virtual, we expected, but it has really picked up in the last month or two. I noticed that the last 2 weeks, the buses have been very full at the end of the day, especially from the high schools and the middle schools. So we're getting, as we wrap up the school year, obviously you can see when school went back to in person, that's kind of when the ridership went back up. But it's hard to tell much from this data right now, but I can tell you it looks like it's heading towards being successful as far as getting students to ride the bus and participating in that program.
I know that our board committed to a third year because of the slowness in getting this off the ground.
Yeah, and I know that, that was something that the city had proposed, and because that first year is with the private donor money, nobody really got their bang for the buck to start out this year. So we are using some of the CARES Act money to fill that gap for the first year and then extend it for that third year. So it seems like that's a pretty good compromise, and hopefully in the fall things will be back to normal, and then we can kind of see how it goes for the next school year.
Right, and even summer school might be a good assessment. For me, this fits in very nicely with our equity goal for the school district.
Yeah, if I might, Dr. Cartwright and I, felt that, because this was almost a lost year in terms of taking advantage of this program, going to the third year made so much more sense. And I've had discussions with representatives at the Boys and Girls Club, and they're very excited about the fact, as Dr. Herzog has pointed out, that the youth of our community will be able to access facilities like the Boys and Girls Club, the public library, summer school, anything that they want to, they'll be able to do. So I think we're really going to see, as we start to get into the next school year, how the potential for this program.
One quick question for Transportation Director Collins. This is Matt. Do you have the ability within your tracking software to know, what buses or what bus routes are seeing the ridership, down to that level, or is it big level?
Yes, we can get some of that data.
Okay. I think oh, go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, we have automatic passenger counters on the bus, so we can tell where people are boarding and alighting. I guess I'd have to check to see if we can tell specifically where the student ridership type is boarding and alighting, but I'm pretty sure we can.
I think it just might be interesting, especially over the summer months, as a few just noted, whether they're using the library, whether they're using the Boys and Girls Club, but then also in the fall too, just knowing where that ridership actually is coming from. I think for the school district going into year 3, 4, year 3, and then hopefully beyond, but who knows what the decisions would be. But that might be helpful in terms of knowing where the students actually need the service, and who's using it. Is it being used on the west side, south side, north, more or less. So just wondering, but I appreciate that. I think it's great. I want to thank the school district for agreeing to add a third year. I think that's a great thing, and my colleagues as well. It's a good program. It's showing that we're working together. We're trying to figure out ways to keep the community moving forward. So appreciate your guys' willingness to give this a trial.
And I appreciate your support of council.
Okay. Any other discussion on the busing update or questions? All right, let's move on then to the Merrell School update.
Okay, we have some representatives from Bray Architects. They're here to show you some information about the new school. And what I'll do is I'll turn it over to them, and they can start running the show and show you what we got. I think it's pretty exciting, and the board got a chance to see it at their last board meeting, and we were excited to be able to share it with you this evening.
Hi, everyone. I just would like to say thank you for having us today. My name is Nate Considine with Bray Architects, and just kind of reorganizing a touch here, Maria Welch, also with Bray Architects here. And once we get powered back up, we will start our presentation.
Just while you guys are getting going, I would like to ask a follow-up question from the community regarding the project, and just wondering if there's been an opportunity to connect with some of the surrounding neighbors around the Merrell school and have some dialogue with them.
What we were planning on doing is obviously presenting the information to the school board first, and then presenting the information to you here this evening. And then the next step is for us to be presenting some information to our staffs. That'll be on June 4th, and then following that, we will be presenting to the Merrell neighborhood. So yeah, we're definitely aiming for that.
If we could get someone to allow Maria to show share her screen, that would be wonderful.
Tony, are you with us still?
Yes, I just transferred presenter to Maria.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you for bearing with us. All right, again, we're very excited to get to show you kind of the progress that has been made and being able to, I guess, start off our first joint update for the Board of Education plus the City Council. So thank you for having us. As I mentioned, Maria Welch and Nate Constantine with Bray Architects is here tonight. Maria, if you could just hit the next. I just wanted to share with you guys that we have been meeting with what we'll call a core planning team, or CPT, and that team has included members from the Oshkosh Area School District, including Dr. Cartwright, Dr. Gunlock, Jer Nehans, Julie Conrad, Jim Fox, Phil Marshall, the principal of Webster Stanley Middle School, Ryan Peterson, the principal of Merrell Middle School, as well as Christy Levy, Tanya Fenner, and Beth Galizzi, 3 elementary school principals, that we thought it would be important to get their feedback as they will, once we finish the middle school design, then leap into the elementary school design. And we feel like it's important to be cohesive from start to finish as we work on this referendum. So as members of the core planning team, these are the members from the school district. On the next slide, you will see the design team from Bray Architects. Clint Selly, hopefully is a name that sounds familiar, as he was involved pre-referendum. And unfortunately, he's unable to make it tonight. But myself and Maria also are just very excited to be a part of this team, and we also have a handful of other team members that span from design team to construction documents team, all the way down to interior designers. So very excited to get going here. So today, obviously, we are excited to talk about the new middle school, and we feel like context is very important. So let's start kind of macro scale here, right? So we are very cognizant of where our site is and the land and opportunity that we have here. So being just north of downtown Oshkosh, not all that far from UW Oshkosh, and really obviously adjacent to the existing Merrell site, as our site is the Jackson Field property. And we realize displacing the Webster students from the middle school will be a further commute for them. But as we look at the overall context, right, we have to understand the adjacency and what will be missed from the Merrell building to the community, to the district, and to the neighborhood, as well as to the students and staff that are going to be in the building regularly. So it's very important to take all this context into play. So we'll zoom in just a little bit further to our existing site. Down in the right-hand corner, where you'll see a couple of soccer fields outlined, is the current Merrell facility location. Very important, again, that we're aware of the community respect for that building. We're aware, I think we talked to a teacher on the second floor when we were there about a month ago that her dad actually taught in that same exact building. So we're very aware, and not even in that same exact building, that same exact room. So we're aware of just the importance of that facility to this area. We are cognizant of just some of the challenges, but also opportunities as it comes to the new site. Obviously a bit longer, and we have just a couple of notches with, you know, residents that we need to be very aware of. You know, whether the residents are within 30 feet of our building or whether they're across the street, you know, combining two middle schools into one is a big impact, not only for the north side, but for the surrounding neighborhoods, to make sure that our building fits in, that it's appropriate to the surrounding context. We're very cognizant of Jackson Street being adjacent, right? And if you look at the site even further, you know, the district has had the opportunity to purchase additional parcels to enhance the opportunity for this building. And if you look at this building has a front side literally on every face. And so as we get into the exterior of this building, you'll see that we've taken very thoughtful design considerations so that every angle that you see from this building is really important. And it's very, you know, this is a major investment that the city of Oshkosh and its residents have invested, and the school district is aware of that. So, you know, as we look at this building from every angle, we know that every angle is going to be seen. So just something to note as we get going here. Specific to the site, you'll see as we get into more of our 3D exterior renderings that you will, the east side or Kentucky Street is tentatively the front of the building. This was very intentional when we thought about students and student safety, parent drop-off, bus drop-off, parking. All of those things were very thought through from the core planning team and the Bray design team to make sure that safety for students and for occupants of this building is really priority number one. You will see on the south side of the site, we're looking at staff and visitor parking. And then on the Jackson Street side, you will see a main elevation for the gymnasium, as well as a main elevation for receiving tech ed and the core academic portion of our building. So Maria, if you would zoom in just a little bit further, we'll go through the floor plan shortly, but the lime green top portion is the core academic, so what I'll call is our bulk classroom area. The lime green just to the left or bottom of that would be our STEAM and FCS area. So I'm thinking about tech ed, I'm thinking about family consumer science. Below that would be building support. So you think about kitchen, receiving, boiler room, some of those things, as we need to be cognizant of deliveries. And speaking to that, you know, we are working through a traffic study right now. We're talking with the city on access points. Again, all of this is very preliminary, but we feel with safety being the most important thing for our students and for the visitors going to this building, the site is just a touch limiting in that way. And we try not to think about it in a limiting fashion, but more or less how we can optimize the site. Continuing on with the floor plan, you'll see the light blue bar in the middle is the admin and main office portion. And it is, sorry, one second. The light blue admin portion, obviously adjacent to the secure entry. Similar to the rest of the referendum, it was very important to make sure that the secure entry would allow for visitor parking, some visitor loop in the front, and making sure that we have a safety and secure entry so that this building can stand for another 100 years. I'll go down to the bottom right where we're looking at a music option down in this lower corner, and then across from it, athletics. And really spining everything together, you'll see in this beige area, and that, you know, it connects the secure entry in the middle. There's a common/cafeteria between the main office and the building support piece. And then as you go to the south, we think that there's an opportunity for a great events lobby. So if you can imagine, you know, you'll see event entry down at the bottom, any after school activities, weekend activities, really more of a public side of the building where we'll show you a 3-station gym, a fitness center, opportunities for music practices on the summers or on the weekends. Really, that entire south portion of the building, although informed shape-wise on the site, really has turned into the public side of the building. So we're very excited about what that offers for this site. Continuing on, we'll look at an architectural massing. So if we start on the left, Jackson Street is kind of right where the mouse is pointed right there. And so, again, going back to the site context and being appropriate to our neighbors, being appropriate to the streets and the setbacks that we are asked to follow. Just kind of, again, showing the light green, the blues, the greens, and how they interact. So again, I'm working left down to right. We're looking at classroom area, kind of building support, cafeteria, admin, and then down on the right side would be gymnasium and music. The image on the right is the same massing diagram, just flipped 180 degrees, more or less. You're looking southwest in this image.
I'm sorry, we're
I muted.
not hearing you.
Go ahead. Say that again, Maria. I am muted, so you should be able to talk through mine.
You guys hear me okay? Can you hear me okay now? Hearing myself. Sorry,
Yes.
everyone. I was going on and on without realizing you couldn't hear me. But what I was hoping to just chime in on the tail end of Nate's portion for this massing was, as we were looking at our site plan before, and we were talking about how it notched in and out for those adjacent properties, that really allowed for a nice opportunity to break up the elevations of the building, which helps bring it down to that scale of the residential context around us. So while those properties may limit us in a little bit of a variety of ways, it also helps us to break down the scale of what will inevitably be a taller, larger building as part of this residential context. So again, our team's trying to be as sensitive as possible to the surrounding neighborhood.
And for those wondering, obviously the school district has reached out to those members owning those parcels, and those individuals are simply not interested in moving at this point in time. We're not going to force their hand. That was a decision made very early on. I think the district will be interested in the future in purchasing those parcels, but for right now, we need to accommodate them. So, although could be viewed as unfortunate, we're doing our best with the opportunity that we have here. So next we'll go into the floor plans. So left to right, you will see the first floor on the left side, second floor in the middle, and third floor on the right. On the first floor, again, the top area is mostly just classroom areas and support features for those classrooms. So as we combine two middle schools together, there's been a lot of concerns about how do we keep a big building feeling small. And one of the best ways to do that is really creating two pods or two smaller neighborhoods that can be divided by something but yet unite in the middle. So if we look on the left side, there is roughly 6 classrooms on the left, and then on the opposite side, there's another 6 with science in the middle. And science is kind of the bridge between those classroom areas. And then, of course, down below, we have bathrooms, teacher prep areas, small group instruction rooms, elevators, things like that. As we move slightly further down, maybe I'll start on the right side. The light blue area adjacent to the secure entry is the main office and a community room towards the top of the building, or top of that blue bar per se. In the middle is a commons with a featured staircase that you'll see a little bit later on in the presentation. In this common / cafeteria area, not only is the staircase a feature, but you also are starting to see this box at the top, and that's a platform or stage of sorts. And that could be featured in a lot of different ways, whether there's a jazz band, whether there is a small ensemble doing something. There could be small presentations for staff. There's a lot of opportunities that could be both within the school and also public use for that area. On the left side, that lime green towards the top is our tech and engineering with FCS labs, so a kitchen of sorts for students to learn those skills. And then that blue bar, again, being receiving, boiler room, kitchen, bathrooms, and a stair up to the second floor. That beige area continues down, as I mentioned before, into the events lobby. And so on the right side of the events lobby, we have 3 music classrooms and their adjacent spaces. On the other side, that green piece, a 3-station gym, locker rooms, storage, PE office. But a community factor that I think everyone's going to be very excited about is just a fitness room that is actually 2 stories of sorts. It's not a full 2 stories. There'll be an opening between, similar if you've been in some of the more recent fitness rooms where there's an elevated spot for cardio and maybe the lower spot would be weights or something like that. But the idea being that they actually have a door directly off of the lower vestibule that, the school could close off the rest of the building, allow access for community into that fitness room after hours. If we go over to the second floor, I'll actually start down on the bottom. And the reason being is kind of to talk about that fitness room again, but also introduce, maybe for some of you the second time, but for some of you the first time, a walking track that is suspended within the gym. So that walking track also available by elevator, also very public access heavy. It's access through the fitness room. It's also access through that lobby that is accessed into the fitness room. And we think that that has great opportunities for learning, for rain days when it comes to physical education, but also just an extension for the community aspect as it relates to the gym. Also down there, we have a multi-purpose room related to PE and then a mechanical room. If I go up towards the top, or I'll say the middle, there's that learning stair in the middle, and you kind of see this white area with that X in between it. That's a kind of a double height cafeteria commons. So you can imagine that if you're up on the second floor, you can look down into the commons, and that whole area is very just glassy and just transparent from first to second floor. The idea, or in conversations regarding inclusion and just trying to really merge and unify the 2 buildings or the 2 student populations was very important. So when we talk about classroom adjacencies, when we talk about special education, we talk about special or not special, or just electives. Thank you. It was very important that everything be very knitted together, but in the same part, we didn't want this to feel like a building that had 900 students. We want this to feel like a building that has 400 to 500 students. So it's very tricky on how we work this site. We combine everything together, but make this building feel small, even though it's going to have, again, upwards of 9 to 1,000 students. So one thing to note here is you'll see the lime green art areas there. Special education kind of wraps this second floor. And then in the lower right-hand corner in the middle is the media center or library. And that has a lot of adjacency to some soft seating or learning areas outside the library, small group instruction rooms, and a production room on the second floor as well. The top area is really a duplicate of the first floor. So as we talked first, second, and third floor, we felt like it was important that each of that area was exactly the same from the floor below it. And what the idea is that the first floor would be 6th grade, the second floor would be 7th grade, and the third floor would be 8th grade. We'll slide up to the third floor as that is the 8th grade portion. But as you will see, it is strictly just the classroom area. Most of this building is 2 stories with the exception of this one area. And we felt like it was important, again, to compact this building as much as we can, but also be cognizant of our building height as our neighborhood, our real close neighbors, and just the community surrounding this building doesn't feel like this is a giant amongst a bunch of residential area.
I think the other really important part of any school that we design, but in particular this one coming from historic facilities, is that we are providing varied educational spaces for the students, in some cases spaces that they've never had before. So we touched on it a little bit, but these beige areas that really connect and serve all of these classrooms will be collaboration zones where kids can have more spontaneous learning, group learning, singular learning. So making sure that we're covering the breadth of ways that students learn. And you'll see that as we move through the 3D images later on in the presentation as well. So Nate did mention briefly this concept of unity, and when we start to think about how to extrapolate a floor plan into actual architecture, we look to find a concept that will guide us through that. And our team is really passionate about designing a school environment that is uniquely tailored to the school population and the school community itself. So unity is kind of an obvious one here. We're obviously unifying the students of Webster, Stanley, and Merrell, but we're also looking to unify new and old. We've talked about the historic facilities. We've talked about pushing towards the future. And as Nate mentioned, going through the floor plan, the unification of program and really exposing all of that program and celebrating all of the program. And as we move through, how does unity start to inform architecture? So this is a pretty abstract diagram, but we wanted to include it here because it does show you how we are starting to weave that overarching principle into our design decisions, both from the exterior and the interior. So thinking to ourselves, what does unity look like? Here you'll see a preliminary sketch that we did. Moving into the exterior design portion of our presentation, again, we know that the community is very sensitive to the fact that the historic Merrell School will no longer be in use for the middle schoolers on the north side. We also looked at existing context in the Oshkosh area, both on the north side and the greater area. And there are a lot of historic buildings that have very similar architectural elements. So some of the questions that we started to ask ourselves from the exterior design standpoint was, how do we take cues from historic architecture and implement them in a contemporary way? How do we weave old and new together? And how does this parity inform the unifying identity of the new middle school that I just talked about? So as I mentioned, we sort of did a Oshkosh tour and we looked at some of the buildings around town, including the historic Merrell site. And we started to extrapolate some of those architectural elements that were indicative of some of those historical movements and thought about how we could infuse the contemporary building with those elements. So this is again sort of an abstract study of some of the things we saw: vertical accents, masonry detailing, horizontal datums, and regimented window patterns. And then again, as I said, we're very passionate about creating a unique curated design. So what architectural elements are uniquely Oshkosh New Middle School, because we don't have a name for it quite yet? From a materiality standpoint, again, we wanted to be very sensitive to the fact that there is an existing historic facility. In historic facilities, you see a lot of masonry, you see a lot of highly detailed architecture in the detailing. So we wanted to bring that to our building as well. So you will see a reddish brown brick, a flatbed stone, and then a dark bronze metal panels along with accented copper. So a nod to the historic as well, but using them in a contemporary way. And I am lucky enough to do the fun part of the presentation, which is to literally kind of take you on a tour of our facility. We use this design software that makes you feel like you're playing a video game almost, where we will walk this path. The stars here indicate some of the final renderings that we're going to show you prior to kicking off of our tour. But we're going to start at the secure entry on Kentucky Street. We're going to work our way around up to the core academic along the Jackson Street side. We're going to look at the gymnasium, and then we're going to finish looking at the events entry. So I'll show those finished renderings, and then we'll walk around the building. So if you want to look at the key in the corner here, again, that star will kind of help orient you. Here we are looking towards that secure entry. You can see a vast amount of glass. That is actually the library, anchored by the administration office area, and then accented by this pedestrian plaza So as we mentioned in our site plan discussion, we have 3 access points into the building, this being the one for visitors throughout the day that will come through that secure entry sequence. So identifying those 3 access points by similar plaza architecture. Here on the left, you're seeing the music volume, and then just beyond in the right, you're seeing the core academic. Again, you're seeing that architectural unifying element that I mentioned along with some of those sketches, and you'll see that in a few other places as well as we move around the building. But as you'll note, you're starting to see some of those historic vertical piers, punched openings in the masonry, and you'll see that again throughout. We actually just walked north. We're now looking back towards the core academic space. And I just want to note that sort of balance between the masonry components and the more contemporary glassy volumes. And again, by pushing the building in and out in this way, it creates a more comfortable sense of scale as you are a residence adjacent to this building. Whereas you can imagine if this was one big flat facade, it would be a little bit intimidating. The other thing that this architecture does is it creates a sense of place for students. So each bay that you'll see as we walk around indicates a classroom. The glassy volumes then indicate the collaboration areas that I mentioned on the tail end of our plan discussion. And then again, a plaza to welcome students as they arrive from the bus on the north side on Nevada Street. We just were standing down here. We walked along the north side of the building. We're standing on Jackson and we're looking south. So again, you start to see each bay indicative of a classroom. You see those vertical piers that I mentioned that were inspired from historic architecture. You can also see some masonry detailing that we're starting to work through. Again, really pulling some of those details from the historic architecture. Anticipating quite a bit of landscaping. Again, we fully recognize that the Jackson Street side is a main thoroughfare through the entire city, and we want this to look nice, and we want this to be something that the Oshkosh Area School District can be proud of and want everyone to see as they're moving through the city. So as you can see, some of our receiving functions here screened really nicely by the landscaping, also controlled from a safety and security standpoint by this fence. What you're seeing just beyond the fence is that STEAM area on the first floor, so the tech and engineering, and then special education on the second floor. And then just beyond, you can see the gym. We just walked down Jackson. We're now looking north. So you are looking at that gym elevation. Again, we want this elevation to look nice, to be inviting. If you were to walk down this area here, you would get to that parking lot on the south side of the building. Again, similar treatment from an architectural standpoint, vertical elements. You see that nice brick with the stone horizontal datum and accented by the metal panel. A lot of nice glass, natural daylighting into the gym as well. This will be our final rendering or still rendering that we're going to look at. We're now standing just at the mouth of that parking lot, looking towards the events entry and the fitness center. So again, as I mentioned on the first rendering, you see that unifying architectural element, not only highlighting that entry point into the building, but signifying this is the new Oshkosh Middle School on the north side. And then to the left, that's that stone volume that we were just looking at. So again, balancing those contemporary glassy components with more traditional structured masonry.
I think it's important to note that as we, did our tour throughout the north side of Oshkosh, some of the materials that Maria already mentioned, but that we're very aware of is, on our historic buildings within the city, there's flat cut stone that is typically a beige or a gray of sorts. And then there's a relatively brown or red brick that is commonly used. We know that the Merrell site will be missed on the north side. I know that there's still conversations regarding about exactly what happens there, but we feel that, by introducing the materials that are common, we try to bring a merge of the historic feel versus the contemporary. And this is hopefully something that can be very exciting for the north side, exciting for Oshkosh Area School District, and exciting for the city of Oshkosh.
So as I promised, we're going to take you around the building. We're going to go that same route that we just took. But the software, as you can see, really just gives you a better sense of how the architecture starts to feel.
One thing to note is we talked about the copper metal panel, and you didn't see a lot of it, right? Because if we put copper on this entire thing, it will just shine and kind of look like an eyesore at sorts. So we picked very pointed portions of the building to introduce that, to be a balance of the dark metal panel, and really accent some unique areas on the building.
Something else that was important to note, and we've mentioned it a few times, but you can see it in this model as well, is that we actually took the time to fully model a block out from our new facility so that we could really start to get a sense for how the scale of the existing neighborhood will fit with the new building. So that's what you're seeing in all of these sort of white boxes. Those are representative of the single family residences around.
It was interesting. We were a little bit nervous when we first saw this site because I said, wow, we're really in the depth of a residential neighborhood. And I was worried about a single story home. But fortunately, this site is surrounded by many, many two-story homes. And so that really helps, I feel, with the scale of the building. I'd be a lot more concerned if we were, surrounded by ranches. But the fact that we have two-story homes around this area is a benefit to this site. As Maria is kind of spinning back, you'll see the brick detailing and kind of the weaving that we talked about earlier in between the windows. And again, the vertical emphasis. That was another thing that we saw on our tour. You drive through downtown Oshkosh, you drive through UWO, even a little bit further north. There's a lot of vertical emphasis on even 3 or 4 story buildings. It really helps break up the view or just the scale of the building.
So then you can start to see how the buses would begin to queue on the north side. As kids would enter the school for the day, they would be welcomed by this plaza, as I mentioned. As I spin around here, again, to help orient you in relation to the plan, this is sort of one half of the neighborhood or the core academic class. This is the other half, and then this is actually the facade for the science classroom, as Nate says, kind of the bridge between those two. Really looking to engage the site fully. So looking for a lot of landscaping again to really soften that, as well as help with safety and security.
And to further our conversation earlier, we talked in a great depth with the core planning team regarding which way this building faces. And, the security was a big piece of this. Any sort of student traffic on Jackson Street was very worrisome for the district. So having to deal with bus drop-off, parent drop-off, and realizing, specific to the Merrell, and it'll be interesting to see how the Webster students transition. But we were told, somewhere in the neighborhood of, 60% of the Merrell students walk or ride their bikes or take local public transit to the school. So we know that as some of the extents for those that attend Webster Stanley, as they come over here, there will be additional parent drop-off and additional busing. But, the district feels that, we're still looking at somewhere between 50 and 70% of the students are going to be, walking, biking to this site. This fence area, we're not showing a gate, but, some of the early conversations with the city is that, we're worried about the traffic in and off of Jackson Street. Having a fence here to deter, but also having gates that would be on timers. And, this area is really for deliveries. And by no means is this the back of the building, right? This is what we call Jackson Street side of the building. But knowing how important safety is, knowing how important traffic safety is, fencing off not only for our neighbors, but also, limiting traffic limiting basically parents being able to pull on this side and drop their kids off there is not something that the school district is interested in. That's not something that I think the city is interested in either. So as we go through the traffic study, more and more of that information will become available to us. But know that this area we're planning to have a fence and a gate to really help with the access here. It is nice on this side of the building, as Maria kind of pans over, is just how the ease for deliveries. If we try to take deliveries off a different portion, it would be very challenging for a large truck. Another side of it is that we're able to pair it up with the tech ed side of things, and we anticipate deliveries as far as wood and things like that. And so keeping that together and one delivery area is also a benefit to this site.
Something that we
Might
wanna
I-
make sure
can I
that
ask
we
a quick
actually
question on
do
that?
as well, and we've mentioned it a little bit previously, is that the future goal on the school district side is that this property would be purchased at some point, which would allow for this plot to be turned into student green space, potentially a playground area. So as we start to look at this elevation, I would just urge everyone to keep that in mind. Knowing that this will serve as a plaza pedestrian entry point potentially in the future, which is why our design team actually decided to, again, carry that architectural ribbon and that glassy component to this elevation on the Jackson Street side.
And so what that really is doing is we started on the other side of the building. That is the main entrance. If you go straight through those doors, the main entrance is directly through there. So that is really a volume where there could be entrance off the east side or the west side, allowing, that's strictly just a pass through, right? And although we are talking about the Kentucky side as our visitor entrance, this could very well be student access. Go ahead, Dave. Oh, I'm sorry.
So was there a question from one of the council members?
Yeah, if you don't mind, just because you're on Jackson Street, and I know we're going to come back to this, but and I appreciate trying to keep the traffic off of Jackson. But anybody who knows Oshkosh, the idea of a semi backing up on Jackson Street into that loading dock is a farce. That's going to be fun to watch.
So the way that area is designed is that they would actually not be backing up into it. They would be able to drive directly into it, and then there's enough space between the fence and the building for them to maneuver and turn around in there.
Maybe a semi.
We do not want any sort of backing off of Jackson into this site. And again, we understand the complications just with the site in general, and we had to be very thoughtful about that. And so, yes, to echo you, no one wants to see any sort of backing into this area. It would be what I had described to members of the planning department was that this would be a 5-minute in and out, hopefully, and instead of let's just say a 30-minute catastrophe at 8 a.m. and a 30-minute catastrophe at 3:15 p.m. So that was kind of very purposeful, and we're hoping that the traffic study and the planning department agree.
Yeah, and I
So
think
if I could ask then, going back to the orientation, so with Jackson being a corridor and gateway arterial road, this elevation seems to essentially turn its back on a main arterial. And I guess, I'm just kind of trying to understand the decision for putting service bays and utilitarian things facing outward. Can somebody help me understand that a little more?
Yeah, I mean, really, that was charged by the fact of student safety and really keeping students, for the most part, away from Jackson Street. And so to the core planning team and to the design team, that was very much thought that we don't want the main entrance and student entrances on Jackson Street. That was very intentional by the school district. Now, I will say that, going back to an earlier point, there was a lot of effort put into making this not feel like the back of the building. Now, there are obviously construction material and things like that, limitations to making sure that this is built properly. But if we, I guess I would, I'm not overly familiar with some of the other spaces, but this, we look at the gym with the inviting windows, the different materials, the accents related to the stone and just architectural accents, masonry detailing that we look at this piece. I don't necessarily think that that's an eyesore. And then I can understand, as you move further north, that a fence may not be the first thing you want to see. But if you look past the fence and as you come up to Jackson, as we're kind of driving per se in a car, you're still seeing the beautiful core academic area. There's a very unique language regarding the windows, and that area is very important to the school district because that is the entire special education area. And so by no means, let me back up a second. With all intention, this was designed to not be the back of the building. And I would say, if that house, if that wasn't there, then maybe we'd have a different solution. But for the most part, I mean, we still have that very frontal entrance once that house goes away, in that glassy entrance for students right there. I just wonder if you're responding to the fence. I wonder if you're responding to some of the other items and missing some of the detail that's really given to the Jackson Street side.
Yeah, it was just I think it was the service bays and the fence and the very utilitarian, imagining mechanicals, you know, dumpsters, those kind of things. I guess maybe it was just a reaction, but
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, if I might, your concerns have been noted, and staff has given those comments in the preliminary. So I think the architects understand that the traffic issues that Deputy Mayor Mugrauer brought up are certainly a concern. You're aware of all the traffic work that we're doing on Jackson Street, and we've got to accommodate that. Their challenges, they do have three sides, and I sympathize and welcome that at the same time. It's a challenge, but it'll be a huge improvement to the neighborhood. But we've got to do everything you just said is got to get addressed, and that'll be part of the plan. Eventually, the Plan Commission will be looking at this, and the purpose of this wasn't to get to the Plan Commission level yet. Staff has asked for the traffic study, and they're in the process of hiring a traffic engineer firm to do that work so that we can review that.
Yeah, and I think just to reiterate, this is not the finished final documentation either. We fully acknowledge that we are going to be working with the city and the Plan Commission in order to make sure that this solution is right for everyone. Right now, as engineers do, and I can say this because ours isn't here, but our civil engineer was just making sure that he was being sort of the most conservative, and we'll push him, as we always do, as we continue to work with you all at the city to make sure, again, that this is a solution. But I do want to just reiterate that there won't be any sort of backing into the building or into the site from Jackson Street. Whether the solution looks exactly like this or whether it morphs, which it most likely will, a truck, whatever size, will come in, pull forward, and then back in. And again, we recognize that our site plan, when you look at it and you see all that pavement on the site plan, you're like, oh my gosh, what the heck are they doing? But as I said, we are going to continue to work through this. We're going to continue to push and make sure that it is satisfying all of those requirements. And from the architectural side of things, I'll just echo what Nate said in that we put just as much architectural design effort into the Jackson Street side, if not more, knowing that this was a main thoroughfare, to make sure that this does look the way that it does.
And I think some of the, what it might be your instant reaction would be is wow, Kentucky Street gets like this big, glassy, beautiful facade, right? And Jackson Street has a bunch of punched openings and a couple of overhead doors. as we continue to lay out and try to figure out how the best, function and layout of how this building operates, I would love to build a building, that made sense for students where there's glass on every facade, but we're not building business, towers. We're building schools for students to really engage in, and we want to make sure that we're being appropriate not only to our context, being appropriate to the learning environments as well. So Maria, do you want to actually jump back over to the Jackson Street gym view, and then we can kind of finish on the south side?
I guess we didn't get all the way over there, did we?
So again, we realize that landscaping is going to be a large piece of this, and adjacency to our neighbors is another piece as well. Again, we're very aware of our proximity to our neighbors, and just one thing that we're going to be in dialogue with them very shortly on is how, if you plan to stay there, which they intend to do, how do we protect your property, right? How do we prevent students from going in, playing basketball in their garage, kicking their trash cans, whatever it is that students are doing these days. And those are conversations that we are having with those neighbors.
Yeah, again, and site access as well. I mean, we're certainly hoping that people aren't doing what I'm doing right now, right, and cutting through the site in this way. It just happens to be the most efficient way to get over here. But we're going to continue to work with our civil engineer, work with the school district, and work with the city to make sure that we have access where we want it, that we restrict access where we don't, that we have visual interest where we want it, and all of those sorts of things. So just wanted to finish up our tour then on this south elevation. So again, we're standing just at the tippy top of the visitor staff parking lot. This would be where grandparents would come for Johnny's basketball game at night. They would come through these doors and then enter into the gym. So again, using that same architectural language. And to our earlier point, balancing the contemporary glassy components with the masonry.
One other thing to note is the large swath of glass just left at the doors. That is the very community focused and also school focused, I suppose, community fitness center. So again, the idea being that someone from the community could enter those doors that you're looking at, and there's a door directly to your left and an elevator directly to your left to access that fitness room that can be utilized both by the school district and their students as well as the community.
And if I could just ask a question about the discussion about restricting access and community access. I guess I've been hearing from some folks who are interested in knowing, so is this inviting community in after or outside of school hours? Or is it restricting students or others from using the space when school is not in session? I'm sorry, I know that's a more operational question, but I'm just getting a little confused on that.
Yeah, so some of the early conversations have been that this would be accessible for community members before school and largely after school and on weekends. That doesn't mean that depending on how the facility, is used throughout the first couple of years, if there's opportunities that could be afforded to the public, on different days or different hours. But the preliminary idea is that this is available from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. and available from 4 p.m. until 10 p.m. or something like that. Is that accurate, Dr. Gunlock?
Yeah, it would be along the lines of our recreation department and having some of those opportunities to make this a community hub for the neighborhood. And we don't have anything specific planned, but we wanted to make sure that, the key thing you're going to see in the design, both interior and exterior, is flexibility. And the concept of how do we make sure, because we built this for 100 years, how do we make sure that it meets the needs of our community, not only now, but down the road, and especially in a community like ours that has such a well-running and well-developed recreation department. This gives one more opportunity for our community to come into the buildings, because they, they fund these buildings. They should be able to use these buildings to the extent they can and to the extent that it does not interfere with instruction.
This is something that we've been working with other school districts on as well, sort of the access to these community fitness rooms, and we'd be happy to reach out to those districts and maybe see how that's going for them and how that's working if we'd like to. But more likely high schools that are doing this, but also middle schools as well.
We just knew that when the referendum passed that, there was many portions of this facility and eventually the new elementary school that really need to be community focused, that the north side could very much benefit from. That was an emphasis by the school district to start, and we want to make sure that we are honoring that request.
And if I could just ask another question too, I know there was some reference in the early layout showing like soccer fields. Did I miss, or are you guys looking at any kind of external basketball courts? The reason I ask is if you happen to drive, I don't know, 4 blocks in either direction of this, you'll see a number of the portable basketball hoops out on the streets because the residential lots are so small and there's not really that option. I was just kind of curious, was there an external basketball court?
We're pulling up the site plan right now. The discussions regarding that site are still very early. Soccer fields are simply just a placeholder of sorts. We are trying to determine what is best for, access for playground for the middle school students, what the north side really needs. And so hearing that basketball courts is something that is needed, we will take that information back and continue to digest it at the core planning team level, and also discuss that with the city planning department. I know one of the things that specifically the Webster Stanley folks, tried to fundraise for a few years ago and came up a touch short was a playground specific, for just the variety that exists within the student population. And so getting a playground that is accessible for all is going to be important here. But to your point, this area is still undeveloped. I think there's been conversations specifically about the Merrell building. What is the future for that? I think the members from the core planning team feel that this is best served as a green space, but we understand just the sensitivity about losing Merrell. So as that conversation develops, we'll be in contact and feel free and really get you up to speed on some of those things. But the soccer fields were more or less a placeholder.
Yeah, and I think to Nate's comment, we are still kind of fielding what's going to be the most appropriate solution for that greenfield site across the way for students and kids within the community and otherwise. But I do want to note that even though it's still very preliminary, we are starting to think about ways from a site design standpoint to get kids safely across the street. So starting to think about crosswalks, bollards, paved paths, what can we do visually and architecturally to make sure that is the most safe that it possibly can be.
So then wrapping up kind of the full circle here, you'll see that this area that Maria is pointing at is the music volume. So taller windows, taller space, music spaces are just naturally taller to help with the acoustics and helping with students learn in those type of environments. There was talk at one point in time about an auditorium. We're not building an auditorium, but the location of this would allow for future growth with a variety of different curriculum options, with music being in its location. So again, no auditorium at this site, but its location opens its hand for future growth at this facility if it were to be seen. So that wraps up the exterior. Any other questions as we walked around the building?
If I could add, this is Chris, by the way. If I could add one thing, the last time we saw this presentation, we recommended that they look into utilizing that stage in the commons area potentially for different types of auditorium activities. So we are looking into that as well.
That was the perfect transition. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we have started looking at that as well, so we will have that ready for future presentations.
And if I could just add one thing, we're also looking at potentially expanding the Hooper Auditorium at North as a stage for the arts. That's very preliminary.
I'm sorry, Barb. I couldn't quite make out what you were saying there. Could you repeat that, please?
I guess I can kind of chime in for Barb if she's having some technical difficulties. Can you guys hear me? Yes? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So at the last board meeting, we were provided this slide deck as well as another slide deck related to what we're referring to as performing facilities, and kind of creating a long range plan and a short range plan on that. And so it also involves athletic facilities, but as well as you know, the performing arts, fine arts and such like that. And so the discussion kind of emanated from the loss of the auditorium space at Webster Stanley Middle, and what we can do to expand that either at Merrell. And we've kind of felt that expanding that at Merrell wasn't going to work in the new site. So it led on to a different discussion about where could we do that on the north side. And right now that discussion is preliminarily happening around the expansion of the Hooper Auditorium, updating the Hooper Auditorium and expanding it sometime in the future. So so we won't do any of this stuff without creating our plans first, and looking at it from a holistic sense for the whole district, because it's not just the north side that we got to look at. We also got to look at, you know, the West High School and the auditorium over there. We have to look at all of our athletic facilities from all of our schools, and potentially, you know, creating a larger off-site athletic facility as well for the district. So.
Well, this is Councilmember Matt Lugar. I think you guys got a fantastic looking building. I appreciate all the insight you guys have put into this. It's not an easy process you guys are going through by any means, and appreciate you guys including our planning department so much in this. You know it, but I'll say it. It's got to be right? You're only doing it once, and anything you do, we can't easily undo. So, but it looks like you guys got a fantastic plan, and I'll be happy to see it when she's built. So good luck with it.
Thank you for those words.
Yeah, thank you guys.
We'll shift into the interior if you guys are interested in that. Dave's giving me the nod of approval. So Maria, yeah, we'll go through this quickly.
Well, we do want to include you. We want to include you inside as well. But we will keep it brief. We know that we went a little bit long on the exterior and the site, but we knew that that's important. It will continue to be important, but want to give you a sense for how things are shaping up for the interior architecture. So again, there are a few things that we ask ourselves as a design team as we start to develop the interior. Similar to the exterior, how can the interior architecture celebrate the student identity and experience? Again, this is a unique circumstance where we are combining two student bodies that have two different identities and experiences and combining them into one. How can the unifying language of the architecture create wayfinding opportunities? Again, ease of access and movability in the space is really important. We know that kids struggle currently to make their way through some of the historic facilities and get to class on time. And where are there opportunities to highlight the past of each existing facility? So again, just briefly wanted to touch on that idea of unity and how that's weaving its way into the interior architecture of the building and creating a sense of place for each academic neighborhood. So again, the abstracted idea of weaving, stitching, interlocking, repeating, nesting, and aligning, sort of that's what unity looks like to us. and using that as an identifier for each grade. So identifying where we want to use those different architectural languages in a purposeful way. And then as a note, we've mentioned we really are trying to be strategic about honoring the existing historic facilities. So an idea that came up during the core planning team was, are there any existing building materials that we could potentially reuse as part of the new facility? And we were actually lucky enough to have original wood flooring in both facilities. That we thought that something really unique could be to literally stitch those two wood floorings together to literally represent that idea of unity and coming together. So these 3D views and the walkthrough for the interior architecture aren't as well developed as the exterior. It's kind of a sketchy black and white tour, but we think that it does really help to understand the space. So again, here's our map. We're going to be in that double height common space that we talked about. The stars indicating the images that we're going to show you prior to jumping in on our tour. So the first place that we're looking at here is actually that raised platform that we were just talking about. So again, identifying a place that will both enrich the cafeteria for everyday student use for 90% of the time, but also providing an additional area for small, medium, and potentially larger performances. So as Chris mentioned, our team is studying how many seats can fit in this commons for a potential performance or a graduation ceremony or what have you. That's what we're currently working on. But just speaking to the architecture here, we are starting to implement that idea of weaving in the ceiling and then highlighting that salvaged wood flooring as well. Again, we're now looking in the opposite direction. So you're seeing that learning stair that really anchors this entire double height space. You can see the amount of natural daylight that comes in through the clerestory windows. And you can also start to see the transparency that we're providing into a lot of the programs. Again, really trying to connect all of the curriculum together and all of the students together. So here you're starting to see the makerspace and then our art and STEAM classes on the right and special education office on the left. So again, that transparency really bringing everything and everyone together. This last image here then is up on the second floor, actually part of what we've deemed the library collaboration space. So you're actually looking towards the east, towards Kentucky Street, through that large swath of glass at the library that we saw on the exterior. So again, trying to provide as many varied, enriching education spaces as we can that you don't currently have in the facility. So with that, we'll do a quick. As I mentioned, these don't have the sort of finished quality. They don't have the materiality quite implemented yet. But again, it gives you a nice sense of how the architecture is starting to develop, how big things are. So here you can start to see that stage as we move forward. Again, really putting those programs on display to celebrate those.
Have you guys seen this? Okay. Here's some stuff. You've seen it? Okay. Sorry, keep going.
If we just kind of pop our heads up to the glass here, you can start to see that FCS lab. So again, really highlighting each individual program. Here we're going to come up the learning stair, and you'll notice that on the left, these treads are a little bit taller. This allows for comfortable seating on these taller treads.
So it's really an interactive stair where students can eat lunch on the stairs. It's really combining the first and second floor, really stitching this entire building together.
This common space is hugely important. It really serves as the hub for the entire school, that connector point between the south portion of the building where the gym and music functions live, as well as the core academic on the north. Students will be passing through this space all day, every day. It'll also be a huge community asset as well.
And something that we're very aware of, right? When you bring this many students together in a big open space, acoustics, you're like, oh man, that space is going to be very loud. But we work with acoustical engineers to make sure that the space is designed properly so that although it is going to be a big space, a lot of natural light, a lot of air, that it'll actually almost probably feel a little oddly quiet at times, given how large the space will be.
The last space we want to highlight today is the collaboration zones that I mentioned before. So this is a zoomed in plan of a academic house. So again, 2 stops on our tour here. We thought it was really important to provide comfortable, again, varied learning environments. So you'll see flexible seating, soft seating, tabletop seating. You'll see small group instruction rooms for smaller groups to be able to go close the door and work on quieter work. But we're also looking to integrate built-in architectural elements for larger project areas. So again, providing access to all of these spaces, as well as teacher collaboration opportunities to provide as many environments as we can, as I keep saying. So here the star indicates where we're standing again. We're actually looking towards the science classroom. So here's that built-in architectural piece that I just mentioned. Still very preliminary in how that thing actually functions, but again, wanting to provide a space for students to roll out big projects, get their glue out, do those sorts of things outside of the classroom.
And as you'll see, there's a lot of visibility, right? We want, or I guess what we've been encouraging as we've successfully done in other districts is that, a teacher should be able to say, you 3 or 4 go out into that area and work, and the amount of glass, although we study and understand the safety side of it, also allows for just multiple different learning environments. And the studies have shown, a kid sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day is not nearly as productive when a student can get up and simply relocate, sit in a different chair, sit in a different type of chair, and move their environments throughout the day.
And before we move to the 3D walkthrough here, I just want to again highlight the ceiling elements, looking to design each grade level slightly differently, not only for the wayfinding component so that students know where they are, but also that identity piece, tying it all back to our guiding principle of unity. So I'm going to zip down. Hopefully I don't make anyone car sick.
Look away for a minute.
So here you can really start to imagine a threshold of security. To Nate's earlier point, we know that we need to compartmentalize the building in some way. So we're really moving from something that is a little bit more public and accessible to the learning community itself. So again, on our right is the science. And we're moving into the learning community now. So we're passing by that tech bar, that project area that I mentioned. We purposefully designed the locker bays to be consolidated into groups. We don't often recommend corridor lined lockers anymore. We also are recommending that these lockers be shorter. They're modeled at 4 feet right now, which allows for an adult to easily see over and supervise the kids. And our interior designer will be working directly with district leadership as well as educators to make sure that we're providing and recommending the appropriate furniture solutions for this specific student population. And with that, we know this was a lot to digest and you probably weren't expecting to see all of this today, but we're hoping that it does provide a little bit of context, generate a little bit of excitement and a little bit of explanation for why some of the design decisions that we've made thus far were made and how we're looking to move towards the future.
Any questions for what we showed you interior? We thank you guys for your time today and inviting us to present. We will continue to work with the city planning department, with school district leadership, as well as the core planning team to really bring this city, this area, something that they can be excited about for many, many years to come.
If I could ask too, thank you so much for that detail. If I could ask, it was mentioned earlier that you're presenting, and I guess if I could ask, is there a public participation plan of sorts to also receive information? I know there were a number of folks who were interested in that as well.
I think, Dave, if you want to weigh in on this, I guess I'll just say that I know early on that there was thought to be sessions brought up for the north side for those in the area that are obviously very interested in the project. Dave, can you speak?
Yeah. First off, the first group that we've been meeting with has been the internal staff. So we started with the core planning team, and that was more getting around the 50,000-foot view of all this. The next thing we've been doing a lot of is meeting with the teaching staff once we had enough design that they could look inside and begin to look at what are the amenities and the various design elements inside the building. So that's really what we've been focused on now. The next piece is going to be presenting it to all the staff, not just the department heads in the various discipline areas. And that'll be on June 4th. And then there'll be an opportunity for people to see things if they have any questions, concerns, how certain things line up, et cetera, shortly thereafter. So that's sort of the tiered approach to that we're looking at taking. And we're looking at doing the same thing when we eventually, a year from now, are at the same point with the new elementary school.
Could someone, Tony, are you able to release the screen?
She just has to turn off the screen share.
Okay. Mr. Peschel had asked, if we could go back to our group view. Appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, I see Councilmember Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just had a question, and I'm not sure if you're quite at this in the process, but I'm curious if you've had conversations about, what sustainability elements you're gonna, weave into, whether it's the architecture or the facilities, utilities. How does sustainability play into this? Because, whenever we have a new project, it's an opportunity to, implement some new sustainable things. So I'm just wondering if that conversation has been had yet.
We have had the start of those conversations. We are still ongoing with them as we are bringing more and more engineers on board. One of the things, I think, I guess full transparency a little bit here. There's often some catchphrases or some key things out there that a lot of the general public is aware of, whether it's geothermal or whether it's, sun as far as solar panels, things like that. The district took an early study at that with our engineers, and due to the gas prices, it's actually much affordable, and even looking long term on the lifetime of this building to go actually away from the geothermal side of things. This building would, and that's just one side, right? We're looking at water runoff. How can we properly capture water? And whether it's being reused or captured and then slowly draining away from the facility to make sure that we're not affecting public infrastructure in a negative way. A lot of these conversations are still very early, but I guess I know geothermal is something that people often think of right off the bat. That is something that actually is, as of recent, kind of not as efficient as due to the gas prices in the area.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We will continue to study that, and if we have more information in the coming months or whatever it might be, we'll be happy to share that with you.
I think it's a multitude of scales too, right? It's the macro and then all the way down to some of our landscaping decisions, which we're still kind of digesting some of the landscape requirements for the city, but we are looking to potentially use more native plantings and things like that. So there's such a variety of things we can do when it comes to sustainability.
I guess one thing to note is we are working with Focus on Energy, that is a state partner, and making sure that the building is being designed appropriately to meet the criteria of Focus on Energy. Not only does that help the overall performance of the building going forward, but that also offers incentives to the school district to do the right thing, and then push your tax dollars even further, as they would provide incentives to the school district for doing X, Y, and Z.
All right, well, thank you again. And it doesn't appear, I don't see any other hands raised unless I've missed someone. Thank you again for joining us and presenting that. We do have another item yet on the agenda with broadband access. Was that coming from city or was that coming from school district?
Madam Mayor, that was a conversation we had at the Community Sounding Board, at which you had a discussion with Deputy Superintendent Gunlock. So don't want to put Dave on the spot too much, but
That's right.
That was the issue. So
we were asking about some of the heat mapping and data that was going on. Thanks for reminding me.
So we do have quite a bit of data on that. It comes from two different spots. One of them is a survey that we take every year. It's called a Bright Bites survey. And what it breaks down to is roughly 5% of our 10,000 students or so do not have broadband in the home. We knew that. We didn't know if that was accurate until COVID hit. And we have handed out about 500 Wi-Fi hotspots at a cost of about $250,000 a year into the community where students can check those out. And that was very successful. Other districts did the same thing. Many districts had a hard time getting a hold of product. We did not have that issue. We were very fortunate. So we were able to provide that service out there. Well, also the State Department of Public Instruction, Kurt Kiefer, who is the Assistant Superintendent for the state in terms of technology, has done a wonderful job incorporating that into a lot of people's online registrations, including our own. So we now are gathering even more specific data through online registration, asking a few key core questions that we are going to be able to dissect some of that data and create a heat map of where we're seeing major deficiencies in terms of online access. As of about a week ago, we had about 50% of our families already complete online registration, so we got about 50% more to go. The Bright Bites survey for this year is going to end on June 4th. So once those two things are completed, we'll have a pretty tight amount of data that'll be the most accurate for us to take a look at what we're going to do going forward, because we do not anticipate continuing to spend that on mobile hotspots, at least not that much. We know that we're going to have to provide something, but we want to evaluate and take a look at what is the best way to deal with that. In addition, what we talked about at the Community Sounding Board is we believe there's going to be a tremendous amount of federal funding coming down the pipe to get at probably one of the most bipartisan things I've experienced, and that is the need for broadband. So I think there's going to be a lot of federal dollars coming, and everybody's kind of scrambling in terms of what do we do with those dollars and how do we create something that is not only sustainable but really cost effective so that we use those dollars well. So we're at the beginning stages of this, but I think the best communities are going to be those that partner in some cases with the private sector as well, because they have the sustainable infrastructure in figuring out how do we deliver those services to not only our students, but also our citizens. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we talked about. Did I miss anything, or do you guys have anything else to add?
Thanks for sharing that. I thought council would be interested in hearing some of that information. And so are there any other questions? Folks, just speak up. Feel free here because I'm not gathering everybody on the screen here. All right, thanks again for that update. Looks like we have a very thin title here called Other. So if other folks have questions or concerns or discussions for or planned for future agenda items with this group joint workshop. Well, we're at 7:30. So if we are wrapping up, perhaps we will take a motion to adjourn.
So can I just
Oh,
quickly?
yes.
So just looking at number 6, the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education is happy to host the next one. Are we thinking in 3 months from now, 4 months from now related to that? So I think that puts us at roughly August, September for our next meeting. Is that a good time frame to shoot for?
How does that work for the school district? Isn't that crunch time for you
It is
guys?
crunch time.
Yeah.
So before or after Labor Day, I guess would be the question.
Dave, do you want to take a stab at that? What time do you think? Do you think in August or later September works better?
I think the advantage of doing a later September is we have school started and we can give a little status report of how things are going. I think normally that's not always that exciting, but I think this year we're pivoting away from COVID. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, as all of you are, that it is very exciting and that we take these things off and all sorts of good things happen. That I would probably recommend September would be good. Plus, it also gives our new superintendent an opportunity to kind of get a few meetings under their belt before they are able to provide some information to us as well.
Sure. And then if both boards are welcome to the idea, I guess myself and Mayor Palmieri and Mr. Roloff and the new superintendent can work together to create the next agenda for that meeting. Does that seem like a reasonable plan for everyone?
That sounds good.
Okay.
All right, thanks again, everybody. Anything else for the good of the order here? All right, shall we adjourn?
Please.
All right. Good night. This was a workshop, so I guess we don't really need to take roll.
No, just
All
so
right.
long.
Good night, everyone.